Okay, hi everyone, and thank you for joining us today for our webinar on Behind the Scenes, How Colleges Are Managing Enrollments During COVID-19. My name is Emily Decatur, and I'm the Associate Director of Transfer Initiatives and the Regional Student Program, or the Tuition Break Program, at the New England Board of Higher Education. So a little bit about NEBI. We are a regional compact that serves to promote greater educational opportunities and services for the residents of New England and its colleges and universities. We work to increase collaboration among the region's institutions and to expand access, success, and affordability for all residents. So some of our programs you can see listed on the screen here. I think many of you will be familiar with our Tuition Break program. So Tuition Break provides savings on out-of-state tuition in New England's public colleges and universities for our residents. To find eligible programs, you can pop on over to our website, which is nebhi.org/tuition break, and poke around there. On our website, we also have a lot of really great resources for students, parents, guidance counselors, related to college planning and financial aid resources. Related to a little bit what we're talking about today as well is our new transfer initiative that we've been working on called the New England Independent College Transfer Guarantee. So this initiative works at building pathways from community colleges into independent institutions in a systemized fashion in the states of Connecticut, Massachusetts, as well as Rhode Island. So something that's very timely as well are our COVID-19 resources that are available on our website. We have a really robust page that's available for you all to take a look at. We have interactive displays about going on, a really wonderful COVID-19 weekly newsletter, which you can head to our website and subscribe to that too. It's really great and gives you a roundup on what's going on within higher education, and with things changing as quickly as they are, it's a wonderful resource to have. So let's dive into a little bit more about what we're talking about today. COVID-19 has caused some major upheaval in all areas of life, really. I think we can all attest to that, and including higher education as well. So colleges and universities are now navigating a new world full of uncertainty and determining their fall admissions and enrollment as well. So in the meantime, school counselors, prospective students, and their parents are wondering what September will bring. So today we hope to maybe answer some of those questions. We'll hear from two experienced college admissions administrators who will provide insights into what's happening on their campuses and the impact of COVID-19 on admissions. So to outline a little bit on what's going on today is we'll hear from our panelists, and then closer to the end of the hour, we'll open up for question and answer from you, our audience and participants. So just a few notes, a few housekeeping notes before we start. You all probably noticed that you're muted. The chat function is disabled, so the way to communicate with us if you're having technical issues or if you want to engage and ask questions, that will be at the end of this segment, is to use the Q&A little section that's right down at the bottom of the screen. So you can type in your question right there, and near the end we'll have those questions come up and we can circle back to them. So we are really grateful to have our two panelists here today. So I'd like to introduce them all to you. First, we have Adrienne Odie. She's the Dean of Admissions at Trinity College in Hartford, Connecticut. She is a national leader in the admissions field. She joined Trinity from Berry College in Georgia, where as Director of Admission, she led a team in developing and meeting strategic and enrollment goals. We also have Jared Cash. Jared serves as the Executive Leadership Team, a member of the executive leadership team at the University of Southern Maine, directing the enrollment division that includes admissions, student financial aid services, marketing, public affairs, athletics, and the registrar's office. Prior to joining USM, Jared served as the Vice President for Enrollment Management and External Relations at the University of Maine in Farmington. So thank you both so much for being with us here today to have this conversation. As I mentioned, feel free to pop in any of those comments down at the bottom. Would like you to engage as we move along in our conversation today. So just to start things off, we'd like to hear a little bit about what's been happening on your campuses in relation to admissions and enrollment and what we can see for this upcoming fall. So why don't we start with Adrian? Maybe you can talk a little bit about what's been happening at Trinity.
Thanks, Emily, and thanks, Nebby, for putting this together. At Trinity, we've really been all hands on deck. And so I think sometimes, especially to prospective students and families and counselors, it can seem like there's not a lot of stuff going on because there aren't definitive answers and decisions that have been made en masse. And so know that there's a lot of activity happening behind the scenes, and I've just been really impressed with how the Trinity community has come together in this. And so traditionally, admissions has run point on all sort of issues with prospective students and families, and we've gotten so much support from faculty members and other staff members. And so the greater community has really come together, and that's been really exciting to see. Even though we're not all in person, I feel much more supported moving forward as a result of this health pandemic.
Great. Thanks, Adrian, for filling us in. Jared, do you want to talk a little bit what's been happening at USM in Maine?
Yes, thanks, Emily, and good to be with you, Adrian, and really all our colleagues from the counselors who are our partners every day, every year, and couldn't be more important how close we're working together this year, and I appreciate the flexibility and the families that are listening in, students as well. I think that's really been the theme, is flexibility and ingenuity and really goodwill. Tonight I'll go home, I'll be just as tired as I was the last 4 or 5 weeks every night, but somehow every day I'm inspired by the type of above and beyond creativity and thinking and collaboration that's occurred on our campus, and I have to assume that that's what's happening in all of our other campuses around the country, certainly symbolic of what's going on in the nation. And so that has driven a lot of innovation, just getting our students fully online, our students who are relying on us to make sure they can graduate on time this May. And we're really proud that we're adapting and those things are happening, and we've retained our students actually a sliver even better than we did last year. And so some really amazing student-focused work has happened. We'll get into some mechanics, I'm sure, later.
Yes, we will. So thank you both. And let's dive into that. So dive into kind of the behind the scenes, as we're calling it, with admissions at this time. So Adrian, what do you think is different about this admission cycle compared to previous years?
Yeah.
Besides everything.
Right. So much of our work, especially at a small residential liberal arts college, is built upon the in-person, face-to-face interactions with families. And so much of our spring would have been spent traveling all over the world, meeting with people, shaking a lot of hands, putting on, large programs on campus, and all of that has shifted virtually. And we've had to, as Jared was saying earlier, think really creatively on how we can connect with students and families, and have found a lot of value in phone calls. I'll say it seems really small, but I don't think I'm the only person who's getting some Zoom fatigue and video conference fatigue. And so a phone call pivot has been a welcome change for me, and seems to be a positive change for families as well. But just that lack of the in-person experience has been a big shift for us, and also trying to navigate the uncertainty of the future and when things may return to some idea of normal, and assuring folks that it is going to be okay, and there will be something that's exciting and compelling on the other side of this, but being comfortable not knowing what that is yet.
Mm-hmm. And how has the engagement been in the virtual space for you folks over at Trinity?
We've seen quite a bit of engagement in our shorter webinar experiences. We opted not to go for a big all-day online thing because we didn't think people would want to spend all day online with us. And so we broke that up into smaller, focused sessions and have seen probably about half of our admitted students engage in at least one of those experiences since we launched them, which has been really great and has taught us that we can still be relational and engage with people even if we're not in the same room.
Right. And Jared, have you over at USM, have you guys been creating a virtual space for students and parents as well?
Absolutely.
How's it been going?
Absolutely. It feels like a year ago, but it was early March, Adrian, when we were really coming to grips with the reality. I think as in every corner of the marketplace, and it week or even hour by hour, it became pretty apparent in March to April that bringing 1,200 people together for an accepted student day is just not going to happen. And so I'm really proud. We put some great planning teams across all layers of a large university in place, some that connected directly with government agencies and Maine CDC and with the system colleagues that we have to kind of leverage all of our knowledge. But we tried to, as much as possible, get past the moment when we were holding on to what we were used to and saying, okay, the game has changed. How do we offer our students and families who are in this predicament something that will work for them now that they've gone home from their high schools? They're in a remote setting as well. And that's where, yes, we went from, our traditional offerings where, the campus visit is considered so important to us when you look at our practices over the decades, to putting virtual campus tours up, launching. We've had a really engaged presidential live stream. Last night, I think there was over 280 accepted students and another 200 on YouTube live stream following, and just really having great conversations about what it's like right now to be at the university in an online format and getting ready for the fall to be in a full return, and just answering questions kind of like we're doing here, hopefully. And those have been really, really high engagement levels. We've tried to do that. We've taken our student ambassadors, which are so important. We know that the engagement with students and our tour guides is really important in making a final decision. And we've been able to work with their campus jobs to transition them to be remote and to be helping us and to run panel discussions in smaller groups and to engage with families in these online formats. We've also brought in our advisors and our academic leadership because there seems to be, this is something that was interesting to me, a lot more interest engaging on the curriculum in these online formats. That and almost equal to what is the physical space that I can't see as much. So we've done a lot to kind of bolster those programs up. I'll say a few other things. I really sighed a big relief that a year ago we made the decision to go standardized test optional, and we also removed the application fee. So we had two things that in the public institution space is really important right now to not have as barriers for a lot of students. And those are things that we literally had made decisions almost a year ago this month. And we had those things out of our way kind of going into the year that we were fortunate about. We're also going to be organizing, using Zoom, a large statewide fair. USM's taken the lead with our sister campus, the flagship up in Orono, and actually engaging all the Maine colleges in what typically would have been those NECA college fair kind of face-to-face format. And we'll be trying to do that via technology in mid-May so that our juniors and sophomores can get engaged as well. The last thing I would just say is, I'm sorry to go on, but we did hear from counselors it was important that the deposit fee was a problem, so we significantly reduced that. And we also set up an online waiver form for Pell eligible students that completely it starts them at a commitment process to getting onboarded as a student and enrolling in courses, but in lieu of that, it waives their deposit fee. So just trying to think creatively about how to be student focused, but not have financial matters being barriers right now. The last thing is we extended our financial aid eligibility deadline from our typical April 1 cutoff to June 30th, because in our situation, we were realizing as of late more than, and this is just in the last couple of weeks, there are a lot more families taking a harder look later in the game on the finances and honestly just being closer to home for our marketplace. So we felt we wanted to make sure those late applications got the strong financial aid packages.
Great. Yeah, thanks, Jared. So it sounds like you're really taking the approach to lean into that uncertainty almost that we're all experiencing right now collectively. And thank you for kind of explaining to us all those additional flexibility decisions that your campuses have been making as far as enrollment and admissions goes. Adrian, can you give us like the private college perspective on what Trinity has done to change up these traditional admissions practices, like your deposit deadline and whatnot, in order to become more flexible for students?
Of course. And so we are very much a kind of traditional selective college that operates on pretty historically rigid deadlines and timelines, and flexibility is very much the mindset and mentality we're bringing to this year, and something I'm really excited about carrying forward as well. So we have extended our deposit deadline to June 1. Typically, students who don't check an interest in applying for financial aid on their admissions application don't get reviewed for financial aid, even if parents and families are submitting forms. And we've decided to anyone who's submitting financial aid forms will be reviewing them at any point in time they submit those forms to us, and trying to make Trinity as affordable for as many families as possible. We also automatically waive, and have been for the last several years, waive enrollment deposits for anyone whose family EFC, expected family contribution, is under $15,000. So that just happens automatically. And we're finding that it's the families that are just outside that range, that are solidly in the middle class, that are having some issues too, since so much has changed financially in such a short period of time. So anyone who's asking for enrollment deposit waivers is getting them. We are reconsidering financial aid packages that we sent to our early decision applicant pool as folks are getting a better handle on their finances, looking at some flexible payment and timeline options on that front too. So really trying to hear from our students and families what's going to work for them, because we certainly have a group of people who are ready to start at Trinity yesterday, who want to continue moving forward with the process, whether we're in person, online, some hybrid, doesn't matter to them. And a lot of people who are waiting until June 1 in hopes that we'll have more direction on what the fall will look like, and maybe even be able to drive around campus before they make a decision. So trying to serve that broad range has been really exciting for our admissions team, and they've just done a tremendous job stepping up and meeting people where they are, which I think is a huge luxury in this space.
Yes, absolutely. So speaking of the fall, I know that, well, at least to my knowledge, neither of you have a magic ball where we can look into and see exactly what's going to happen even tomorrow or next week or next month, let alone the fall. But that means that a lot of students and parents and also institutions have to start thinking about what are the different scenarios that could potentially happen. You know, we're hearing a lot from students and parents about what if this is all remote in the fall? What if we're not on physical campuses? What if it's half and half? And I'm just wondering, maybe we can start with you, Jared, if you could shed some light on maybe some scenario planning around what could happen in the fall and what students and parents maybe should, different scenarios they should try to plan for and start thinking about now.
Great. Well, for us, there's some interesting modalities that I'm not accustomed to having in more in my traditional background when I worked at other schools that were face-to-face residential, 100%. But at USM, we serve a lot of students who drive to campus. We certainly have a large residential population, and we also have 25% of our courses already offered online previous to this last semester. And so what we plan to do is we're planning to be fully operational this fall, just as we were in the spring, but back on campus. And August is the earliest month we're even still considering face-to-face programming that's mission-centric. We do a lot of online programming in July. I mean, it's in several thousand students who are enrolled at USM in what we call our third term. So we're a year-round school. We have multimodal. We have 3 campuses. So we put all of those ingredients on the table, and we stay sort of in this now casting kind of mindset. And it's the best way I can put it, because I believe that the over speculation can be sometimes just as harmful. And so you have to kind of set up working teams that are looking at everything almost no longer than every other day with new information and adjusting our scenarios. But we feel really confident. And the models are, we're the one that we're leading with is we'll be back fully in the fall. And but completely in compliance with any guidelines and from the state and all the social distancing measures that we'll all have to be thinking strategically with. So I do think one of the things that's been helpful for us is thinking of the different combinations of modalities and pedagogies we can lean on.
Great, thank you. What about you, Adrian? What scenario are you looking at?
Yes, so we are hoping for the best, which would be everybody back on campus, all systems go in September, and are preparing for any number of different options. Unlike Southern Maine, we've been a pretty face-to-face, small classes, in-person kind of place, and our faculty have done a tremendous job turning over to online remote learning during this time, and have certainly learned a lot about what that could look like, and are preparing to offer their courses online if they need to, and are excited about having that decision, a decision being made before they start their courses, because the way they would prepare for an online course would just be different than the face-to-face experience. And so the rapid shift was a good exercise for us to experience in preparation for what could potentially happen down the road. So we've considered everything from what does a full year of virtual learning look like, to what does a hybrid model look like. We have to consider not only our prospective students and families, but also the current faculty and staff and their comfort level with being in large spaces with a lot of people, and trying to address the needs of the faculty and staff as well. So there's a lot to consider, and something that can seem really, really simple, which is, I think, why people haven't been really quick to make decisions, because so much is contributing to that decision, and there are so many implications that are hard to see.
And I would just add one more thing, Emily. I mean, a lot of us have had to do really fair adjustments this spring, and that's certainly something we're doing because we realize these are hard times, not just for the institutions that are returning room and board revenues. Before March 31st, the University of Maine system gave back 47% to students who were living on campus, and room and board reimbursements to their student accounts. That was a pretty substantial and fast reimbursement if you think we got to that point before April 1. And we use that mantra a lot in talking with families and thinking about our strategies, that we need to be boldly planning to return. And if for whatever reason we can't do that, like, we'll be as fair as we were in the spring. And I think that's an important point to make, because the data shows that families are watching how they're being treated right now through this process, as far as how how they're making their decision to stay committed to the universities or not taking a year off or waiting on the sidelines. And so this is a really, you went back to creativity and student-focused questions early in the call. In my opinion, these are the type of policy commitments, values that institutions have, which many have outstanding values, that really make this type of two-way street, fairness, kind of fair handshake kind of work, make it work for us all so that we can kind of be bold about getting back to normalcy, but knowing that we'll be fair with our students and families. So.
Yeah, and I think students and families, they feel that and they see that, these institutions, especially in New England, really taking care of the communities that they have on campus currently, and even these new prospective ones, and being available for phone calls, for virtual events, and all of that has been really great. So leaning into more of the positive side of things, that's something that I've been trying to focus on, at least personally during these times, is taking that, not that we haven't been talking positively, but like the positive outlook, what is the silver lining we can maybe take from this? So what do you think this COVID-19 and the pandemic and the situation that we're in, it's kind of offering institutions an opportunity to be more flexible and more student-centered. So maybe, Adrian, you could talk a little bit about, Trinity is a very traditional school historically and more highly selective. So how is this maybe changing admissions moving forward and continuing like that positive mindset and more student-centered?
Of course, I think that students will have a lot more opportunities in the future. If a place like Trinity is willing and interested in examining different ways of learning and different ways of demonstrating mastery of different topics, like that's very exciting and should be really exciting for students looking to start college in the really soon immediate future and in the not too distant future, because you'll get to be a part of this change and can influence this change. I think this is a really wonderful time for us to examine why we ask students to do what we ask of them in the admissions process and what value that's bringing to us as an institution as we build community, and what that's doing for a student who the college search and process should be a really thoughtful time in your life for you to explore what you really want to do next. And I think shifting to a virtual world and kind of pausing on a lot of activities and reducing some of the noise gives not only us as enrollment professionals the opportunity to really reflect and think through all of our processes and continue to build upon the stuff that's working really well, and to be bold, as Jared was saying, in discarding the things that just aren't working for us or we don't think will work for the students who will be applying tomorrow. I think students, you should also be looking at what is working for you in this kind of environment, and what was working for you before coronavirus, and what do you want your world to look like after coronavirus. So that should absolutely influence your college search and application process too. So we can be doing this exploration in sequence. And if there are any students on this webinar who want to tell me what they think about college application requirements, please feel free to reach out to me as we reimagine what this process will look like here at Trinity and at other schools going forward.
Great. And Jared?
Oh man, I think this has done so much so quickly on so many levels. I won't labor the internal things because we're talking to our families, but I will say I've never seen so much cross-training amongst my teams and amongst my colleagues. I feel like we've all been quickly forced to understand each other's nuances of work. And what I love about that is that it helps us really get hands-on even more with supporting students when they're on the ground. If we understand the policies, if we understand the pinch points, if we understand how to mechanically make things happen, and all of the background things that we don't want the students to really understand are there to support them, but they are there to support them. I feel like I've never seen a higher level of communication and expertise across a university campus. And I do think that will pay dividends to the student experience when we come back to normal. And, it's a very interesting question, because I've been thinking a lot about what each generation is shaped by, and it will be really interesting. I think this has been large enough, and with 2 children of my own who are in high school and in middle school, I think of how much their generation will remember this, be shaped by the adaptability. And, this was more than just a couple snow days. This is going to be something that I think transitions the way they think about big ideas and being solution thinking, being part of the solution to all the economic needs in the future. I'll back up a little further. I think one major progression that has been already happening for the last 10 years, and I would say this for everybody, selectives included, but probably in a little bit more urgency on those schools that are serving like the 90% of the student population we've tried to relax this gatekeeper mentality of higher education enrollment. And I really do think of Trinity as a leader in their space of the selective schools on this dialogue, and thinking about how are we student success advocates? How are we solution brokers? How are we collecting the best fit, the best information, the best intelligence we have, and putting that student in a pathway that they can afford, that will be intellectually stimulating and get them to think about the bigger questions, develop, graduate on time, and in good shape to, launch into a career. And I don't think that those questions that have been driving a lot of change in the last 10 years due to the demographic decline across the whole country, I think it's only been quickened. And I think this disruption will show universities that they can change more quickly than we originally thought. And I like change, but I got to tell you, I'm surprised myself, and how much. I was just looking at a comment the other day. We were doing an after action analysis on our application processing, all the checklists that people on this call, our guests, they get to know when their application is complete. And one of the notes from our operations staff was, Zooms just don't work. We need to have more face-to-face meetings. And I would just laugh, because that was only 3 or 4 months ago. And we are living and creating and operating so well via Zoom right now. And I think people look forward to the connectivity almost from that. Although I'm sure we would, like you were saying, Adrian, I'd take a phone call and it's a social distancing talk to mix things up lately. But I just think we have shown ourselves that with good partnerships, with good communication, and a willingness to put the student first, we can really weather a lot of hits. And furthermore, we can take those lessons forward and come out of this stronger. So. Mm-hmm. One of the things, and I know we have some counselors on the call, one of the things I never thought I would enjoy so much is jumping on these little county counselor calls that our admissions staff have been setting up by county. And they've been fantastic, just to have, 8 colleagues from a county on a round table and say, what are your pinch points? What are the struggles you're having with your student population? We will look at pass, fail, generously. We are ready to adjust our merit scholarship. Having those real face-to-face calls, it always comes back to relationships. I just think there's different technology and different needs driving it right now. So.
Yes, absolutely. This really is all about relationships right now. How we communicate, with whom, how we're getting our messages across, and really just trying to all be nimble and flexible and understanding of one another. It's really it is a bright spot of the human condition, right? We're all in this together. So kind of in that same vein, right? with all of these changes that are happening, what do you think is the best way for students, parents, guidance counselors to keep informed about different changes that are happening and what institutions are doing, whether it be your institution or more broadly speaking? Adrian?
Yeah, I think institutional websites tend to, every institution website I've read so far has a coronavirus section that has updates. We also on our website have a section for changes we've made to the admissions process as a result of the coronavirus as well. I think NACAC, for the school counselors on the call, has been trying to assemble all of this information and put it out. There are various social network groups that have assembled information and are putting things out on Google Documents and things like that too. But I think for institution-specific questions, it's always good to go to that specific institution because things are changing rapidly. And sometimes you might catch me right after we've made a change and it hasn't gone online yet and it hasn't been broadcasted through all of these other channels, but I'm happy to share information as soon as it's available moving forward. So don't underestimate the power of a quick check-in with an admission officer who is now getting even better at connecting you with other places and resources on campus, since so many folks have jumped in, not only at Trinity, but at other places to help with fielding questions. So feel free to reach out. That's what we're here for.
And Jared, is that the same for you, would you say, or in general?
I believe that's really good, sound, universal advice. And I would just say one extra thing that is not anything new, and that is we can't be mind readers, but this is probably the best time to be engaged with us because we are using surveys. Probably a lot of folks have done surveys. We have a chat bot at USM, which is really an awesome tool that is very honed in on giving really good artificial intelligence enhanced kind of feedback. So if you don't want to talk to a person, you want to ask a question. We find that students sometimes like that, to ask a question they don't want to ask a person. I don't know why, but it's what the data shows. So engage with a chatbot, because if that can't help, it's going to kick it out to a person who's looking to try to help the next morning. There's a large fleet of folks right now, especially in these remote times, that are really looking for the personal engagement to help students through the financing plans, as Adrian was highlighting, the payment plans, the will this work for me? How do we do an appeal? We've had some changing circumstances, those things. I would believe all universities are welcoming because we're trying to gauge where those pain points are in our student body. So,
and I'll just put a plug in for surveys because one, I studied math and statistics, and surveys and data are helpful. But we also, in response to the survey responses we've been getting, have added programs, and because of the gaps prospective students and families were identifying for us, and it's allowed us to iterate and innovate more rapidly in ways that will serve prospective students and families. So I know it can seem cumbersome to take a few minutes and fill out that survey, but as a place that's taken that feedback and immediately made changes, like please help us out through this experience too.
Great. Yeah. So social media too, you think? So like check the website, reach out to your admissions folks, fill out your surveys. Are you seeing a lot of engagement on social media platforms as well from more like the student side of things?
We are seeing some engagement. We have an admitted student Facebook group, and when we moved our events to virtual, that the traffic in that group definitely picked up. We are seeing a lot of students on our Instagram account as well, and so actually created an Instagram story of our tour that's an Instagram highlight now, so that folks can watch it in little sound bites instead of a full hour tour. If you only have a few minutes, check out the Instagram stories. So we are certainly trying to meet students where they are, and I'm sure it's amusing for the students to see us try.
Yeah. Yes, meet
And I
them
would,
where they are on their phones,
Right.
on their couch. Jared, what do you
and
think?
mostly in the last year, our goal is to make our social media channels both view books and yearbooks. Sorry, I was going to mess that up. View books and yearbooks, meaning we want it to serve both our new student population, but also our current student population, because we believe those messages feed each other with good information. And so you'll see, it's up to you, but you'll see that we've posted some really internal driven messaging. As of late, we're spending every Friday kind of recording certain things, because people are getting tired of reading FAQs and they are getting tired of reading long websites. So we can't do it all, but what we try to do is segment once a week a certain theme. Last week it was excellence online. Let's talk about some really amazing ways that science faculty have taught labs online. Music professors have continued with music orchestration online. So we're having fun with it, and we're showing both the challenges, that it's not all rosy. It's like, here's where the challenges are, and here's how we work through it, and here's the exciting part. But we're doing a lot more of that internal communications, and I think that's what I would want to be looking for if I was a new student. We always say, when you're on campus, get off the program and walk walk off the path of the program, get off the script, and ask some students some questions. So there are I would look for those social media channels that have some internally driven messaging, and they're there and they're available, which makes this really helpful. So.
Right, an additional peek behind the curtain, if you will.
Yeah.
Adrian, were you going to?
I was just going to add, don't just go to the main institution social media channel, but if you're interested in a club or an activity or an academic program, many of our academic departments and clubs and teams have their specific social media channels as well. And it's been really heartwarming to see how they're encouraging and interacting with one another, and a great opportunity to see the institution's voice. So many students have written to me saying they just want to know the spirit on campus, and they're missing that they can't be on campus to feel that. But I do think watching the different social media accounts interacting with one another is a great way to feel what the spirit of a place is like.
Right. Yeah, no, that's great. The little social media stalking, as the kids would say. Digging into that deeper. Absolutely. Well, I think at this point we'll move over into our Q&A portion. So I see we have a bunch of questions that have already started to come through, which is really great. So if you have any more, please feel free to pop them into the Q&A box that's at the bottom of the screen here. Let's see. So we have one here about deferrals, and I think that a lot of students are probably starting to ask you and your admissions offices this as well. So have you seen an uptick in the number of inquiries or requests to defer enrollment to January or September of 2021? And if so, have you updated your enrollment deferment policy? Jared, maybe you could shed some insight on that.
No upticks for us, and we're finding actually our traditional part of our population, which we have a lot of transfers, is actually up, and that they want to come. So I'm not seeing it. I think it's more of a factor for Adrian. I will just say we partner with gap year programs, and we really like those. So we have a few of those that we are expecting by design to have students come mid-year next year. So it's a little bit of it's an anomaly for us more than a practice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think right now we haven't seen a lot of uptick. I think once we make more decisions about the fall and what the fall will look like, we may see an uptick in deferral if there's some sort of hybrid experience or virtual experience in the fall. We proactively are giving admitted students the option to defer to January, and there's very little that we would expect of a student in order to make that happen. Basically, you just tell us you want to start in January, and we will welcome you in Hartford, hopefully in January. For students looking to take a gap year, they typically have to ask for permission from us to take a gap year and sort of explain what they'll be doing. And there's a formal review process. And we're looking at streamlining that for students going forward, because we anticipate in the future students will be asking that question more, and we just want to make it an efficient process for the students and for admissions officers who are reviewing those cases. But as of right now, no major upticks in deferrals and gap years.
Mm-hmm. So remains to be seen, maybe.
Right.
Let's see. We have another question here. So this harkens back to our discussion a little bit about admissions requirements and policies that are changing. Students that are often required or have to show their extracurricular activities and experiences as part of their application and making them look attractive to some schools. And now with them not being able to participate in some of these extracurriculars, how do you think that will look for a student's application? Are your institutions going to be a little bit more flexible about that? How will you be handling something like that? Adrian, do you want to?
Yeah, I'll start by saying an apology to students and families on behalf of colleges and universities and the media for creating this idea that there's scarcity in college and that we somehow have very few spaces and a lot of people looking for these spaces. The fact of the matter is most schools would be very happy to have most students who apply to them. And sitting in my seat at one of the few more selective schools, it's my job as an admission officer to find the pathway to yes. It is way more fun to say yes to students and families than it is to say no. And the positive side of being in such a global experience is that everyone's activities have been cut short or shifted, and being in an office that has the privilege to spend a lot of time with each application, if I'm doing my job well and my team is doing their jobs well, we will know your school and we will know the policies on grading and on clubs and on teams, and we will work to give you every advantage in this process that we can. So I think Jared mentioned earlier the shift from admission officers being gatekeepers to student success advocates, and like we know that your lives have changed. Our lives have also changed alongside of you, and so we're positioned to evaluate your application in context, and we'll try our best to get you the yeses that you want.
That's really inspiring. I think that's really important for our participants in the audience to hear today too. Jared, do you have anything to add?
No, I don't think you can summarize that much better than it really
That was beautiful.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Well, kind of in the same vein with colleges, obviously USM has already went test optional, but now that things are changing in this manner, and more colleges are moving to test blind admissions, we have a question about how will admissions offices adjust to this? And also, do you think that in the future, maybe this will change the face of admissions as far as standardized testing goes? I guess, Adrian, well, I'll send that one to you since Jared's already test optional.
Sure. We are also test optional, have been test optional since 2015. And, over 1,000 colleges and universities are test optional. I do think we will we've learned a lot over the last few decades about what standardized tests do and measure and what they don't do and what they don't measure. And so I think we'll continue to learn through this experience. And I imagine the role that a standardized test plays in the admissions process today, I think it will just play a lesser role in the future, not only for us because we're test optional, but also for other places. This is the first test optional place I've worked for, but the role of the test over the last 10 years has diminished at every place I've worked.
Yeah.
I think it will just continue to evolve. As a disclaimer, I'm on the regional college board, and when we're meeting about the test, they're working hard, even with criticism, which is easy to do at times on standardized tests, to think about how they need to evolve their practices and what they offer as well. And I do believe they're seeing, with some of the context, trying to provide context for universities that don't have the time to read things so closely. They're taking a hard look at it, and they're fine tuning it, and they're coming back to it, and they're not there yet. But I do see a lot of active work being done by the College Board to update what they've been doing for decades. And that's not fair too, because I think they have made several iterational changes over the years. But I am happy to say I've worked at 3 SAT optional schools, Bates, Farmington, and USM luckily went along with that change, which was fantastic. And it was a bold step from the faculty. But I'll just say, for me, there's a lot of ways to get there. And I think that's the fun part of shaping a class and looking at intellectual curiosity and hunger and the context of the environment. But those are pretty much the 3 factors. And then it's just about allocating time. I would say that the rule of thumb is, and I have a call to make this week to a big, moderately selective, large university in the Detroit area. They've called because they knew we went through the change. My quick advice is you usually come down to looking at the strength of the curriculum and looking at how many core courses students took. Now, not everyone does that, but to me, the core classes a student takes can be very different. And then the level of degree of their achievement, depending on how selective you are, can factor in. But strong curriculum is fairly predictable to strong success in higher ed. And so there are other ways. It just takes a little bit more time. And so this will help, and it will help us to think as differently as we have already in so many other areas. Onboarding, orientation, pre-registration processes, these are all big things that do rely a little bit sometimes on placement exams or testing information depending on the major or the academic program they're going in. Things like nursing and engineering are very different than the arts and the humanities and things like that when we're getting students ready for the prerequisites and things. So it will be interesting, but we're going to adapt and continue to do that. And I think it'll be interesting to see that happen more uniformly across the country is my prediction.
Right. I think a big takeaway too from all of this is the idea that from great chaos can come great opportunity, right? Really sounds like both of you at your institutions are really using this time almost like an incubator. To think outside the box and how do we serve students and how do we plan for the future and what will the future look like. We're wrapping up at the end of our time here, so maybe if we could just have like a last few words from both of you, maybe some general advice for students, parents, guidance counselors. Jared, do you want to share first?
Absolutely. You're in the I think we're all in this together, and I told myself I did not want to see that again on one of those commercials. But we truly are. It's a two-way street that I've never seen stronger, and I'm really kind of like I said, on tired days, I'm buoyed by seeing that type of communication between families and our financial aid directors and admissions folks with students who have questions, and that is the lifeblood to making this work for us all. And so I encourage you to have faith in the institutions, that they're going to weather this really well. And we're going to come out of this perhaps a lot stronger than we were going into this last year. once we've come through this time period. And because I think the creativity has really changed. It's taken that limitation that was like a glass ceiling that we falsely had on ourselves and what we could accomplish, and it's lifted it out of necessity. And I would just ask, I just want to add, this is real urgency. Our country needs college graduates. Our country needs we need 3,200 nurses in Maine. We're already short. We need engineers. We need major skill gaps. And that's what I'm hoping to see future leaders step up to those challenges. We're worried about all of our students, and we're also worried about the greater society and the needs we're going to need coming out of this. Those have not changed. So they're just great opportunities, and I think we'll all look back at this and see that there were really great practice changes picked up from this. And I look forward to seeing you all face to face.
So we are very much your partners in this experience. So many of us got into this field with admissions counselor, financial aid counselor, or student success counselor in the title, and we really do take that seriously. And so we want to be your sounding board as you think through different options, even if that option leads you to a different place, because I get the greatest joy out of students finding and determining what the best next step is for them. Of course, I want you all to come to Hartford, but Hartford's not going to be the best next step for all of you. And so would love to be a part of your journey and your story. And so would the rest of the counseling team. I think a lot of times people are afraid they're going to say the wrong thing to an admission counselor, and that's going to mess up all possible chances. And this is an amazing time to test out talking about yourself and what you're doing and how you're spending your time, and great practice for advocating for yourself through college, through the job and interviewing process when it can seem even more meaningful. So I would encourage you to lean into the discomfort of calling up a stranger and asking about the school and being willing to talk about yourself, because you'll find an empathetic and kind voice on the other side of the Zoom or the other side of the phone or whatever format you choose to connect with people. So push yourself a little bit to make those relationships. I think we've learned over the last hour how valuable they are if you weren't aware of that before we started. And we'll give you a lot of grace in this process to make mistakes, because we'll probably make a couple too.
Great. Yeah. Well, thank you both for joining us today, lending us your experience and answering all these questions that we have. I know there'll probably be more questions coming down the pipeline in the future. To everyone that's participating, this will be recorded and will be up on our NEVI website, along with some of our other webinars and resources that we have on the pandemic. If you have any questions, you can email Wendy, and her email is right there on the screen. Other than that, thank you again so much to our panelists. Thank you everyone who joined, and everyone stay safe and healthy out there. And we hope to see you in person soon.